Yes. Okay. All right. Thank you. And I'm going to ask the clerk for a roll call again for the people on Zoom.
Okay. Miguel Martinez,
Here.
Danielle Henderson,
Here.
Michael Widmer,
Can't hear.
He's
speaking.
No, we can't hear you, Michael. You can hear us. Can you do a thumbs up? You're here? All right, there we go.
And then,
Miley.
yeah, but according to our attorney, we need to be able to hear his votes. So can you work on getting your audio working, Michael? It's not just a one-way communication, okay? Thanks. All right, you wanna keep
How
going?
about if he types in yes or no, if he votes, no?
Give him out of it.
Yeah.
No, he needs to.
He wants to give the thumbs up or thumbs down.
Now, a different approach is he could call in with his phone if his audio is not working on his computer, okay? But we'll come back to him. Is there anyone else you need to?
Mylan Nguyen. Next.
Okay, so Michael, you might want to call in if we can't get your audio working, okay? All right, so we are now going to shift to Pledge of Allegiance. And I'd like Michael Drinkwater to lead us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you so much. And we're gonna do public comment. I think there are a couple people on, and I know our clerk, could you read us a disclosure and tell people how they can participate?
Yes. You can join the meeting by typing zoom.us into your computer browser, clicking join on the Zoom website and entering the meeting ID 840-0063-9077. You can also join the meeting via telephone only by dialing 1-669-444-9171, entering the meeting ID and pressing pound. The public may sign up to speak during the public comment period or on a specific agenda item in person by completing a public comment information card and submitting it to the clerk, or virtually by raising the virtual hand icon in the Zoom platform, or if attending by phone, dialing *9 to notify the clerk. Note, dialing *9 on the phone will both raise a virtual hand and lower it.
And then that's how you mute and unmute, is that *6?
*9.
Okay,
*6 is hand up or down. It's unmuted and unmuted. It's *6, right?
Yes.
okay, good. All right, and the next thing is we're looking for approval of the agenda. We'll have two motions. So I'm looking for one from the Western Regional Water Commission members. So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Ms. Andriola, second by our newly elected, Mr. Anderson, re-elected. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. And over to you, John.
For the Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission, may I have approval of the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Allen, second by Commissioner Drinkwater. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, and we're looking for approval of minutes of the October 16, 2024 WRWC meeting. So this will just be for those members. Can I get a motion?
Move to approve.
One second. All right, so motion by Mr. Anderson, second by Ms. Sievert. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. Over to you, John.
And for the Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission, approval of the minutes from the October 2nd, 2024 meeting. This is as agendized. This will just be for the actual meeting, not the workshop. We'll take care of that at a later meeting. If you are so inclined, may I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Okay, I have a motion from Commissioner House.
Second.
Second from Commissioner Crump. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Nay. Motion carries.
All right, thanks. And we're turning our attention to item 8, which is a report discussion of possible direction to staff concerning WRWC's request. Did I skip something? I'm sorry, I crossed it out. Discussion of possible direction to staff concerning regional stormwater utility planning and management. I'm gonna help kick this off, and then I'm gonna ask Kim to do the balance. So last March, on the WRWC, we had somewhat of an extensive conversation about stormwater. That was one of the first. And I had actually initiated the conversation and discussed the fact that the city of Reno had decided to, at least for now, drop their effort to start a stormwater utility. And after they'd given it a lot of consideration, what they had decided to do was to reach out to Sparks in Washoe County and talk about setting up some kind of regional stormwater utility rather than going it alone. So Sparks had already started one. Washoe County, has in a process, but it's not designated as a separate stormwater utility. And I had asked this Western Regional Water Commission at least to consider it. And then in several subsequent conversations, we've mentioned it, we haven't taken action. So we've discussed the need for it. And I know that Councilmember Anderson has been a big advocate of stormwater issues, as have I, as have several other members of the commission. So since we're here at a strategic planning meeting and we're going to be setting priorities, we at least wanted to elevate this to the larger sweep. And I'm going to turn to Kim, and would you like to take over?
Sure, thank you, Madam Chair. So as Chair Dewar mentioned, there has been conversation in previous WRWC meetings regarding the need for looking at regional stormwater at some of the WRWC meetings, particularly during our priority setting discussions and when we present that to the WRWC and the subsequent budget discussions. We, after the past 2 workshops with the Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission, there has been some mention of some stormwater utility operational challenges that would be associated to looking at the regionalization of the wastewater, which we'll discuss in the next item. So what staff is looking for is some, insights, direction, some how we wish to proceed on looking at stormwater versus wastewater and how the boards would like staff to address that. Do we want to look at stormwater from a joint wastewater perspective and combine those efforts, or do we want to look at stormwater separately? Do we want to prioritize that separately on the budget as a project? So we're just looking for insight from the board on where they would like staff, which direction they would like staff to go.
And this is styled as a workshop, so it's really an opportunity, and I'll just, maybe say this a similar but different way. We, at the City of Reno, we have these stormwater and sewer consolidated in one department and similar staff and similar budget, but we divide the budget within that to the various activities. And that's why we thought from both the cost accounting and a focus perspective, it would be good to have them a bit separated. I don't know very much about how Washoe County does it, but I know we have people here from Washoe County that maybe could opine or talk to us about it. And then for Sparks as well, how you actually manage it. But we're not looking for a giant conversation. What we're really looking for is, should we move forward with an effort to even identify how each of our agencies does this work, how many people are devoted to it, what rates they have, just sort of an informational piece to bring back to this board? Or should we entirely wait? A different option is to entirely wait till we complete that very similar activity for sewer, which is our next item. Or while we're doing sewer, should we do stormwater? I guess those are our 3 options, is just move ahead with sewer and stormwater at the same time, or combine them in a combined project. And you all, especially on Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission, you have, the hands-on experience. So we're looking for your input. Yeah.
If I could, you mentioned some challenges. Could you all share some of the challenges that if maybe highlight the biggest challenges that you all are seeing.
Absolutely. Actually, if Director Piper, would you like to talk any more about the combined?
Sure.
Sure. So, I mean, there's the practical aspect of stormwater and wastewater. And that is that in our operations teams and in our engineering and design, we have folks that work on both types of projects. For the city of Reno specifically, we have the sewer fund, and the sewer fund does covers a portion of stormwater, but it's been very small. In fact, our capital program has pretty much been capped. At one time it was 0, and then it went to 1 million a year and then 2 million a year for capital projects. So that is how it's been kind of handled within the storm water fund. Specifically when we have flood events, pretty much those are all hands on deck, and you have your wastewater and stormwater, your street crews, they're all working on sandbagging, on preparing, and then of course there's always the cleanup afterwards. We're setting up traffic control, there's just a lot of coordinated events that happen around a flood event that is going to be all hands on deck. And so as we look at operational challenges of a regional wastewater utility, we just recognize that there will be some challenges with how we handle stormwater if it's not part of wastewater. We've identified that as a group within the North Nevada Water Planning Commission, and it is one of the items that we think should be at least, if we move forward with on a future item here for looking at that service and feasibility and those challenges, that should be looked at in whole as we move forward, so we understand what those impacts are for each of the entities. If that's helpful.
Yeah, I would love to hear from Sparks, because I know you have sort of a separated.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We do have financially a dedicated stormwater fee in the utility bill every month, and that money is tracked very carefully in a separate fund. But much similar to the city of Reno, and actually to a larger degree, because we are so much smaller, anytime we have an event, we can't have those rigid lines when it comes to the operation. While we do have people in our corporate yard who are assigned sanitary sewer versus stormwater, any type of event requires an all hands on deck type of approach where, those lines get blurred. Similar in our engineering staff, they'll work on, a variety of projects, be it reclaimed water, wastewater, or stormwater. So we track the money carefully, but the humans and the equipment
They do both jobs.
is less rigid, yes.
And then how about at the county? I know we have Dave,
I can
Dwayne.
I can speak to
Okay,
that.
here you are.
So in the county, we actually do have a small stormwater utility district up in North Spanish Springs, so it's not the entire county. It serves a very distinct area. The balance of stormwater within the county is actually paid for through our fuel tax and is managed through what we consider our roads crew. We do have utilities crews as well. I'll talk a little bit about them later. And much like City of Sparks and City of Reno, when we have flooding events, it is all hands on deck. So the lines get blurred both from an engineering perspective and an operational perspective. That wastewater crew is very small. We contract a lot of that. There's some transitions that take.
And then I saw Trina here. Would you like to say a few words just about what we did over the last 2 years and where we stopped?
Sure.
Do you want to come up to one of these chairs maybe? Or stand? Thank you.
So yeah, City of Reno, we recognize that, Sparks does have stormwater utility. Washoe County, I think, is attempting to set one up separately. We spent more than 2 years, I'd say 5 or 6 years looking at a stormwater utility. We have a backlog of a lot of projects in the stormwater arena because our stormwater functions come out of our sewer fund, and there's never enough money to go around to accomplish those things. So we got to the point of establishing the business impact study statement, the portions of the ordinance, but we didn't get through of actually setting it up and establishing it. But the City of Reno recognizes that we do have a large stormwater program that we need to address. We are also in the process of doing a storm drain master plan, the first phase of which we found another $100 million worth of infrastructure. And and we have 2 more phases to go, and that was a kind of a smaller part of town. The thing with stormwater is that, you know, the pipes don't need to be replaced as often as sewer, because sewer has, you know, obviously, it's flowing with different caustic things. But at some point, we don't have any mechanism to replace those storm drain improvements, and we really need to get to the point where we do have that.
Well, when we stopped, I know our city manager at the time, Doug Thornley, said that rather than continue on our own, there's a lot of regional efforts going on, regionalization efforts going on, whether it's for fire or for other issues. And he said, I really think the better way to go is to team up with our partners. Now, I know that when he left, Jackie Bryant became the acting city manager, and she had the same philosophy. I mean, so, you know, again, I just want to open it up. I don't want to drag this out, but I just want to get a better feel. Do you think that if we properly position the sewer study, that it could also address stormwater? Because they're going to have to tease apart what is happening with sewer. And, or do you think it's better to do a separate but parallel process? I guess that's what I'm asking. Just, you've all contracted for studies, and the question is of the scope of the study, should it be broader or narrower? So that's where I'm headed. So you said there's someone wanted to speak, raise their hand online? I thought you said, no, we don't take. Okay, so anyway, could someone venture just some thoughts on that? We really could use your help.
I would like to bring one other aspect in. There are what are determined by the state to be high hazard dams.
Yeah.
And so we have several in the city of Reno. I have knowledge Washoe County has several more of those facilities, and they have their own type of maintenance schedule and thing that's.
These are part of the stormwater system.
Part of the stormwater system. I can just give a couple examples. For instance, Virginia Lake.
Yeah.
Is a high hazard dam. So it has controls in place. And what we look at, we have the West Wash near Keystone in North Perrin is another one of our high hazard dams within the city of Reno. So those have separate maintenance and responsibilities. The other thing I would point out is that the irrigation ditches that we have in this community are a specific challenge that we deal with. And we talk about operations and all hands on deck many times during those flooding type events. We are spending a lot of resources on those ditches. And so those are just 2 items. And I know that we have in our priority setting in previous years, we have set, say, the steamboat ditch and looking at options for that. But I just want to bring that to the attention of the body as a whole. If you haven't considered that we do have several of these other challenges that are specific to the storm.
So again, and maybe I need to open up the next item if we want to talk about them together. I just don't want to, let me ask you, would you like me to open up 8 to talk about, do we do it together or separate or never? Or?
There's no downside to that, for sure.
Okay, so I'm going to open up item 8 at the same time. So feel free to, if you're thinking this is something good to do together, or, you know, somehow it's better to have some bright lines between these things. Some folks haven't spoken yet. Would you like to weigh in? Anyone?
I will, I'll take the next step. So we had this at our workshop, we had this conversation, and I believe from the Sparks perspective, because we are proportionally the smallest utility in the valley, our operational side is like I said, the lines are so blurred that I think we would prefer to look at them together, because just in the very simple sense, if the wastewater portion of our operation was cleaved off to a regional utility, but we still have to maintain a stormwater operation, that's going to create costs on us that we're currently leveraging by having.
This is exactly what I was thinking. Like if you go do sewer together and we're left with these remains of stormwater, how are we supposed to manage that?
The elephant in the room for us is that, of course, we have been collecting a fee from our citizens for a number of years specific to stormwater, and we would want to ensure that our citizens are kept whole in that respect.
Well, on that note, I just want to assure you that I went through the whole process at Tumwa and at the county when we consolidated Washoe County water resources into Tumwa, and also South Turkey Meadows GID into Tumwa. And each of those had separate bonds, separate staff, separate commitments, separate revenues that come in. And the financial wizards did an amazing job of separating those, keeping those separate and whole, and yet also figuring out a way to go forward. Took a few years. I mean, the math was complicated, but they did it, especially with the bonds that were all issued at different times, different rates, different payback periods. They still managed to do it all, and it's worked really nicely. So thank you for bringing that issue up. Anyone else?
If I may, Chair, I think something we definitely need to consider from county's perspective, certainly we're in the same boat with City of Sparks. City of Reno, we don't have a good identified funding source for future CIP obligations and it's associated with those. One of the concerns, and you mentioned it earlier, Chair, about some of these conversations around regionalization of services. Those of us who were around when we did the TUMO merger, there was a lot of resources put towards that. And if we start talking about multiple regionalizations at one time, I'm concerned the bandwidth that we have within our organizations to do that well.
Gotcha.
So I think that's
on the fire, since it's the only one I mentioned, the thought has been they're waiting 2 years or collecting a lot of information over the next 2 years, and they would have to, they being all of us, have to go to the legislature and do a joint powers authority, which requires a bill, which requires some thinking through, much like we did flood. Okay, so we had to regionally decide we're going to do regional flood, go to the legislature, get a bill. So that's how they're thinking of doing fire this time, which is different than a coordinating committee, right? Which we don't need legislative authority. So I hear you on bandwidth, and I understand that totally, because we do only have, so many city managers, so much next senior staff, and so on. But I am concerned if we do this whole study on sewer, and they say, oh yeah, that makes sense that we should regionalize, then what about these other tasks, that are still going to be there? Do we just carry them along? Because I'm fine with that too. Do we just consolidate all of it? Everything you're doing in the water, wastewater, stormwater field?
So if I may,
Yeah.
to be clear on my answer, I believe at this point, we need to look at the pros and cons of doing exactly that. If we are looking to regionalize the wastewater side, because we have these very closely related activities, does it make sense to keep them separate? Or does it make sense to fold them in?
Yeah.
And then from there, the policymakers yourselves would have the information necessary to make the value decision for your citizens.
Well, I'll tell you what I would like. I would like to at least do the assessment phase. I would like to understand what resources and what demands we have on stormwater to even begin to have the conversation and make sure we're doing it with the sewer so that we don't have some stranded resources, stranded unaddressed issues. We're solving a problem but creating another one. That's what I don't want to do. So anyone else have some thoughts? Because I want to kind of wrap this up and just get some direction for our next item. And is there anyone that would like to make a public comment or in the back here? I can't see you. Probably should have sat somewhere else, but or anyone online would like to add something into this conversation? No one? Okay. Well, listen, I just want to make sure that, we kind of the classic, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, don't accidentally leave things on the table that we should be addressing. So I wouldn't mind shifting into a conversation about the sewer. And if it makes sense, which is item 8, if it makes sense, then making sure that if we do this sewer one, we direct the consultants appropriately in their scope to make sure that they identify what is in the quote sewer world and don't leave things out. So that's my biggest concern. So do you want to, Kim, say something about item 8?
Sure. So during the last of your WC meeting, I think it was a September meeting, we got some requests to give some educational presentations on the water reclamation facilities themselves, where they're located, some of the board members that represent the different agencies, talking about the other agencies' facilities. So we prepared some presentations on that, which we can start. And then afterwards, we can go into some of the results of the workshop and start that discussion back up again.
Okay, well, before we start that, let me just get a sense. This is not a vote. This is just sort of how you're feeling right now after we've had a brief conversation about this. Is there interest in, presuming we move forward with some version of 8, which is an assessment? Let me make sure I have this right. on wastewater utility planning and management and effluent disposal, so 3 things. Could it be wastewater utility planning, management, effluent disposal, and stormwater? That's my biggest question, okay?
If I may, there's a working group that's been working on potential RFQ for this.
Okay.
Should it move forward. There's been some language thrown around to recognize this very thing.
Okay,
And it's not necessarily a parallel path, but it's to kind of dive into any implications
yeah,
that we may come across when we're talking about this regional innovation. So does it make sense? Does it not? So there's some language that's already in.
That's good. So my only thing is, I love that. I love identifying the implications, but I would actually like to be a bit more proactive and actually ask them, not as a, okay, if we do this, what about that? But actually to give us information up front about what is going on with stormwater. Even if it's so blended, we can't really separate it out at the county. We can sort of separate it out at Sparks. We kind of maybe sort it out at Reno only based on budget. You know, even if they could just give us an assessment of what is happening, I would love to see that at the same time. So I'm not really sure how to proceed except I didn't want to just dive into effluent disposal and leave this kind of unresolved. But I mean, would there be objection to including stormwater into that line about what the study would be about? That's my question. We're not voting, but just, yeah,
If I may.
please.
So the working group, as we were putting together the items, and the working group was the Northern Nevada Water Planning Commissioners, one from Washoe County, one from Reno, one from Sparks.
Okay.
So those 4 along with Kim and personnel. So in the intent of this, which we're looking at, the goal is just to determine whether potential benefits of regionalization warrant further in-depth analysis. We also go on to state that although this request for qualifications primarily focuses on wastewater and effluent management, firms should also account for potential implications related to stormwater operations in their evaluation. And so we did include that as, again, this document has not been approved.
Right.
We will get to that hopefully today.
Yeah.
But that is where we landed,
Okay.
just based on understanding the operational implications that were going to be involved in this discussion.
Is that like did you just read us part of the description of the scope?
Yes.
Okay, so I would like it to be a little bit more clear again. I mean, if that's the way everybody wants to leave it, sort of implications for stormwater, that's okay. I mean, at least we're addressing it, not ignoring it. So I'm good with that. But I'd like to go a step further and just, while they're there counting heads and counting budgets, I'd like them to count heads or FTEs that are devoted to stormwater routinely, and then in a flood, maybe like you got all said, it's everyone, and recognize that. But if you said, John, a separate capital budget, $2 million, you mentioned, I don't know what it is now, Trina, but whatever it is, I would love for them to say, on average, the city of Reno routinely devotes $2 million or $3 million, whatever it is, to stormwater projects for each agency. And I'd love them to say they have 1 or 2 dedicated people that do this as a regular part of their job, but it's all hands on deck when it comes to this. I mean, I would love them to be less like, oops, it's going to be a problem, and more like, here's what it is. So would that be problematic from your little working group of the 4 of you?
I think if the West Region Water Commission is in agreement, concurrence with that can certainly be included in the analysis and the request.
I see some heads nodding, I'm not sure. Is that?
Well, I was part of that working group, sorry, so yes, I'm making concurrence with them, but of course, we're looking for direction from you plural, of course.
The water,
Yes.
Western Regional Water.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. But we're relying on you, just so you know, you have a working group, you do this all the time. Okay, so, I mean, we can vote certainly, but I am looking for some advice from you. I mean, that's a point of being together here.
So just broaden that a little bit, be a little more specific on the implications of not, or if wastewater services are regionalized, what that means for stormwater utilities for the 3 entities and potentially, I guess
I think
how they might also come along, or if they stay with their respective entities, what that means.
Yeah, I think we're soliciting firms that do this type of work and look at the regionalization. We're asking them to provide us their input as they look at this and provide that report back to all of us on these items. And so in this scope, it is written that there are certain things that we want them to cover.
Yeah.
But we also want them to tell us what have we not considered that we should have.
Okay.
Because that's what we're asking for their experience. And that would come back from those proposals.
Well, since I haven't read your scope, I don't know if it's particularly called out. And I'm just asking you if you could broaden the language in there to call it out and make sure that they deliver it as well as the assessment of implications based on decisions. Okay, so that's all. We don't have to decide that here, but I'm telling you how I feel about it. Because I would feel if I got this report and I really didn't speak about it, I would feel like we missed a beat here. Like we spent money, a whole bunch of money. We had to write with our agencies, but they didn't ask this question. So
we're happy to include it based on direction.
Okay, great. All right, well, why don't we turn back to you, Kim, and you wanted to start with disposal.
Well, we're gonna start with an overview
Reclaimed water.
education on the water reclamation facilities and
All right.
processes. So, I have the clicker. Who's got the clicker? Me. All right. So I'll just start out really quickly. This is a figure that's in the regional water management plan. And it shows the locations. This is a really great figure to show the locations of all the wastewater reclamation facilities in our planning area. So we have 5. You'll see in the North Valleys, and you have the Cold Springs Water Reclamation Facility, Lemon Valley, and Reno Stead. And Cold Springs and Lemon Valley are owned and operated by Washoe County, and the Reno Stead facility owned and operated by Reno. What's great about this figure is it also shows the complexity of those service areas and how each jurisdiction contributes to that specific facility within that service area.
Can you tell us some of the colors?
Sure. It's a little, I'm sorry, it's a little hard to see on the screen. Let me see if I can zoom in. Generate.
You want me to point?
So if I can kind of see on the legend, and we can extend it. Thank you, John.
So these are shaded, as you can imagine, with Stump Wharf down here. The city of Reno limits, so the pink color here is City of Reno that feeds into the Stump Wharf facility, which is operated by Washoe County. The dark red are the county residents that then flow into Stump Wharf. Same with the blue. We have county residents that flow to Stump Wharf and Tum Wharf, into the middle blue color there. The royal blue would be the city of Reno area that flows into Tum Wharf. The sky blue is Sparks, and the navy, we'll say, is Washoe County and Spanish Springs that flows to Tum Wharf. So, and then we also have Sun Valley in the teal that flows in. We have same thing with the 2 shades here. In this case, it's Reno and Washoe County. So Reno being the gold or the brighter color, the more muted color being county. Riz Wharf, the darker green is Reno, the lighter green are county areas. The lavender color here is Reno flowing to the Cold Springs plant, and the bright purple are the county residents. So that's how it's broken out. It's by color, but those different shades represent different jurisdictional lines. That flow to those
Are there
facilities.
4 plants altogether?
5.
And I will just let you take this.
All right, next, please. All right, so I'm going to give kind of a little bit of an overview. Truckee Meadows, Casey's going to talk about some of the more specific items. In the big picture, what we're really dealing with, and what you start with, is the product of these plants. And that's not the sewage I'm talking about. It's actually the drinking water. So you have to consider where the source of water is coming from in the very beginning. So for instance, if you're talking about the central Truckee Meadows, that area that was the different shades of blue, the water source generally is of course supplied by Tumwa, but it's primarily surface water or it's groundwater. As long as there's water in the river and we have surface water rights, Bill Houck is gonna send us surface water into the system, and that's gonna be our source water. If we're using Truckee River water into the source water going out to the homes, when it comes from the homes back into the Truckee Meadows Water Reclamation Facility, we have certain things that we have to do. Not only do we have to treat the water, and we have to treat it to the standard that we can put it back in the river, we're required to put it back in the river or to have replacement water rights. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of those details when we talk about maybe some of the effluent side. The same thing with South Truckee Meadows, and not to steal all the thunder there, but when you develop in South Truckee Meadows, you have to overbuy your water because we don't want your water going back. We don't want that water coming in and having to contribute to the nutrient loading of the Truckee River. And so when they take the water, it's take all you want, but want all you take. And so they have separate challenges that they deal with. In North Valleys, when we're talking about the Reno Stead area or even Cold Springs, we're talking about closed basins. And so water in and water out, and we have to make sure that we keep those in balance and how we do that. The cost of water is different in terms of when you're developing and where you get it at. And so that also informs on what we may do with it. So Truckee Meadows Water Reclamation Facility, again, the sewage comes in, we treat it, and we have to meet the standards to discharge it to the river or have makeup water in the river that we can substitute, if you will. And we work with TUMWA very close on that whole water balance to make sure that we are doing that. And it's not just on an annual basis, which is what we used to do a decade ago, but it's on a day-by-day basis. What you pull out of the river on Tuesday that portion better be going back into the river on Wednesday. Kind of a scenario. Next slide. Tom Wharf is owned jointly by the City of Reno and Sparks. We have ownership of that based on the overall capacity. The way we break out this ownership is not only by the costs and how we divide those costs up for either capital projects, which the City of Reno does the management of. So all of the capital improvement projects located at Tom Wharf, the City of Reno manages those. We go out to bid, we oversee the construction. Of course, we work closely with the operations group, but Sparks does all the operations. When we do these projects at capital improvement programs, we pay for them based on this ownership split. When we do the operations, and so the actual physical treatment and Casey's budget for the City of Sparks, we split that by the flow splits, meaning if Reno is flowing at 66% and Sparks is flowing at 34%, we split those operational bills based on the monthly flow splits. Next, we'll turn this over to Casey.
Right, so Casey Messer, People Fire Manager, Meadows Water Reclamation Facility. So just a little bit about our operations. We have 64 Spark staff that work every day at Tom Wharf. We have a full complement of operators, mechanics, electricians, chemists, engineers, and administrative staff, such as our logistics team for warehouse and safety. And there are 4 Reno staff that we have, but we work with them very closely. So we have 3 engineers that are stationed down at Tom Wharf that oversee that capital improvement program. And we have the City of Reno legal team that reviews all the public bidding projects and all of those contracts and everything typically get routed through the City of Reno legal team. We, on average, take in about 30 million gallons per day of flow. And we are permitted to receive up to 44 million gallons per day. So that's our permitted maximum capacity. We are staffed 24/7. That's one of the things that makes us a little bit more unique than the other regional facilities, that we always have operators there. And that's every day of the year.
And you have a lab.
And we have a lab. Yes, we have a fully certified environmental laboratory that is utilized by not only the other regional entities, but also the environmental control teams, which manage the pre-treatment programs as well as a lot of the stormwater compliance. In terms of our effluent reuse, we have a really expansive network. As John was discussing, water that goes into the Truckee River contributes to the nutrient loadings. And so one way that we can reduce those nutrient loadings and build out this sort of cushion for compliance is by having this effluent reuse. So we, on average, do between 3.5 and 4 million gallons per day on an annualized basis. Granted, that's 12 in the summer and very, very little in the winter, but on an average basis for the year, it's about 3.5 million gallons per day. There are 53 sites in Sparks and 2 in Reno. The ones in Reno being UNR Farms and Miraloma Park. But Sparks, this is just Sparks' expansive purple pipe network. They do a number of community landscapes, schools. So there's 3 different regional high schools, 2 different middle schools, elementary schools, parks. We have a lot of parks that utilize the purple pipe system. So that's like the big regional ones are Para, Lazy 5. And then some smaller community parks like Shelley, Les Hicks. And then we have a number of sport areas, so Shadow Mountain Sports Complex, Wild Creek Golf Course, D'Andrea Golf Course, Kylie Links Golf Course, Miraloma Park as well. So there's a huge amount that we're able to reuse every day. It's not on here, but we also have the Tahoe Reno Industrial Center General Improvement District is now able to take water from our facility to some of their customers with some other water resources as a processed water source.
And I want to talk about that a little bit too, because we talked about surface water. We primarily get surface water for our source, but there are times when we are also pulling groundwater. And so in the summer and late in the fall, sometimes when the Truckee River is lower, we're pulling for that, in that peak summer demand, we're pulling from our well water. When we pull from the groundwater, that does not have the same requirement. So then that is our makeup water. We can use that source of water for our effluent. One of the things that's very challenging for us, based on this idea of not an annualized amount, but on a day-by-day basis, as you can imagine in the spring, when we first start doing our irrigation, when the river's really high, we have plenty of water in the river. We also have to come up with the makeup water because we're starting to pull that out and all the source water is coming from the river. Doesn't make any sense from a general, how things work thought process. At the same time, in the late summer, fall time period when the river might be very, very low and have very little water in it, and we're doing a lot of well water, we don't have to return hardly any water back to the river, because, and that's a time when the river actually could use more water going back to us. So there's some challenges that we have as relates to how we manage the water based on the sources.
Madam Chair.
Please.
Casey, that 3.5 million, does that include the trick volumes now as well, or is that kick that above?
That's the previous number of years we've had, so not including the trick.
The Tri-Center, what's really good about that and our agreement with it is that we're able to take water to Tri-Center during the fall and other times to take more water. They have a storage location that they can store the water out there, so they don't have to use it right away. Most of our effluent, we don't have a wintertime water storage location. Stonewharf has that, and that works really well for them because they're able to, again, we don't want their water back because we don't want that loading for the nutrients, so we want them to use it in South Meadows. Our big challenges at Stonewharf, of course, like one of the most restrictive discharge permits in the country, and that's because we have the Truckee River and we love the Truckee River and we want to keep it that way. And if we're going to, and not only do we don't have a choice, we have to put the water back in the river, so we have to meet those standards. And so we have tremendous standards to discharge. At the same time, I guess I've kind of covered all those, or we have to provide that makeup water. In the Tri-Center agreement, they actually did provide a makeup water. And so we have water that they purchase, which isn't always necessarily good for Tumwa because we don't want to see our water here in this valley being consumed for this makeup water necessarily, but it is good in terms of our wastewater side. And our wastewater is our most limiting factor to growth. It's not having potable drinking water. It's going to be actually wastewater treatment. Next. So again, our total maximum daily loads, those nutrient going back, nitrogen, phosphorus, total dissolved solids or salts. We have to make sure that we're meeting those challenges that we have. Other challenges that we've had as of late, we've had some power failures. So I've been with the city since 2005. We've had very few issues out at Tumworth as it relates to power, loss of power. We had 2 direct feeds, but we have had several incidences, 5 in the last 3 years maybe. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, not more.
And we've had more in the last 3 years than we've had in the whole rest of the time previous to that. So we're looking at, those are some of the challenges, and we're looking at what we can do to help with that. Lack of redundancy as we continue to grow. We always want to have a +1. We don't, failure is not an option, as Mr. Drinkwater often says. So we have to make sure we have the redundancy in our place. We've conducted some seismic analyses, and we have some issues with some of our buildings out there that we are looking in our future projects to make sure that we also meet the seismic requirements, because if we had a big earthquake, we can't just have a process go offline and have the water not being treated and accumulating, because it just keeps coming. And then our project costs, we've seen a big spike in our costs in the last few years. Those are starting to tone down a little bit, but when I say tone down, they're not going back to what they were. They're just not increasing as fast as we were seeing previously. Next. Go up to Reno Stead. Reno Stead is our third largest plant. We're currently flowing around 2 million gallons a day. We take in mostly flow both from mostly Reno, but also some of Washoe County in the North Valleys. It's a closed basin. Our discharge is either to Swan Lake or to, in the summertime, we take almost all of our discharge goes to Maris Park, the sports complex, and the Sierra Sage Golf Course. Next slide. Again, it's owned and operated by the City of Reno. This is our staff. We do not operate it 24/7, 365, but we have SCADA systems and we have somebody always on call. So when we have issues that happen in the plant, that they go out and make sure that the reset or whatever those things may be. We did an expansion to double the size, but we're working on the water out, which is the Advanced Purified Water Project, working in conjunction with Tumwa. Next slide. So in the interim, because we still have growth and we want to continue to grow while we're doing this solution, we have a flow shave. So we actually, all the green pipes are the sewage lines coming into the plant. We actually shave or take a portion of that flow of raw sewage after it's been screened, and we divert it over here to a pump. In our overall process, as we clean the water, we end up with some solids, the sludge in the dark green. It comes here to the same spot, and we are pumping this up and over to our North Virginia Street, and that comes down to Tum Wharf where it is treated. And so we treat our sludge here. We don't treat our sludge on site at Riz Wharf, but now we also do a portion of our flow is from the raw sewage, and that is planned to be in place until we have the water out solution where we can take care of that all in the North Valleys. Next slide. This is just a overall schematic. We have our Reno Stead plant, the advanced purified water. We're taking Class A effluent. We're taking it to the next step. We'll go through those processes, piping it up north of the airport and injecting into the ground, pulling it back out for either irrigation and then future use as indirect potable reuse. And so that's just a general diagram of that. We also, again, either the recycled water remaining either goes to Swan Lake or to those other parks facilities as mentioned. Next slide. Talked about these previously. The only one I didn't mention is the truck fill. As you can imagine, for dust suppression at our plant, we have a truck fill where they can come in and get construction water for all of the growth that's happening. Next slide. Our challenges again is that it is closed basin. So water in, water out. We have evaporation at Swan Lake, and that does a great job most of the time. But when we have big storms like we did in 2017 with 13 atmospheric rivers back to back throughout the winter, and we had as much water going into there, we ended up with some flooding and some problems. And so that's what the advanced purified water, and again, it's the wintertime storage option that we're looking for. We have the advanced purified water. The other solution is potentially what we call Red Rock Reservoir, which would be similar to what South Rocky Meadows does with their reservoir. That would give us a location to put that. Then we could expand our effluent system up there. You will notice that the development in North Valleys is going to be different than the development in South Rocky Meadows. And that's because South Rocky Meadows is going to have a lot of effluent they're going to need to use. And so it looks lush and green. in North Valley's water is on the order of 5 to 6 times the cost, so 45,000 an acre foot for water to develop in North Valleys. And so you're not going to see any excess water. So the only other excess water we're going to have up there is going to be either the effluent, if we have a reservoir type system, or in this case, when we recycle it and actually have the indirect potable reuse that we also can sell for that price. And that's what helps pay for part of that project. So those are our challenges.
Thanks a lot, John.
Director Crum with Community Services Department is gonna go ahead and present on the Washoe County facilities.
Thank you.
Do you want the clicker or do you wanna just say next slide?
I'll just say next slide. For the record, Eric Crum with Washoe County's Community Services Department. So as Ms. Rigdon said, Washoe County owns and operates 3 different water reclamation facilities, one in Cold Springs, one in Linden Valley, and one in South Truckee Meadows. Within the county, we kind of divide operations between inside the fence and outside the fence. So Washoe County has a small crew that operates basically what we consider outside the fence. So it's all the infrastructure associated with a sewer that's outside the fence. And then within inside the fence, we perform that through under a contract. So next slide, please. So starting off with our Cold Springs facility, obviously it's located in the northwest portion of Cold Springs. Next slide. This plant currently serves about 2,500 homes in the Cold Springs area, has an average daily flow of less than 1 million or 500,000 gallons. And the effluent in this area is actually managed through rapid infiltration basins or RIBs. In this particular facility, we have sufficient capacity for about 10 years of projected growth. Next slide. Linden Valley, that's moving south. This is located in Linden Valley, basically within the larger Swan Lake area. And you can imagine with the floods of 2017, we experienced quite a few challenges that we hadn't seen before. It's our oldest facility. It was built in 1971. And it is also our smallest facility, serving about 1,100 residential and commercial customers with an average daily flow of just over 100,000 gallons. Interestingly enough, in 2020, the city of Reno and Washoe County completed a joint wastewater and effluent management facility plan and kind of set in motion decommissioning of this plant and transferring all the flow to Reno's STED plant. So we are well on our way to doing that. It was identified as a preferred alternative in the county's position to submit permitting to NDP early next year. Next slide.
I have this quick question. Are you saying that it would no longer be, that agreement, when is it going to be fully exercised and that will be no longer, did you say next year?
So permitting would be submitted to NDEP next year.
Okay.
In terms of timing, I might defer to Dwayne.
Curious.
There's a lot of factors at play,
Okay. Fair enough.
including the advanced water treatment, capacity availability with the Marina STED facility, pace of growth, and some of the other infrastructure pieces. So this is on a hot standby.
A hot standby is your answer.
Thank you. Thank you. Next slide. So the last facility I would talk about is our South Truckee Meadows facility. This is our largest facility. Next slide. South Truckee Meadows facility, it serves approximately 25,000 customers with an average daily flow of about 3.6 MGD. This facility is actually a zero discharge system, so we utilize the Hufker Reservoir for our storage, and then we use 100% of the reclaimed water to provide irrigation to many parks, schools, golf courses, commercial and street landscapes. Next slide. We're actually, this is kind of exciting. We're in the final stages of a $115 million expansion to Stumworth. This expansion project will allow us to meet the projected average daily flow of 6.13 MGD in 2040, with this substantial completion slated for November of next year. So we're about a year away from that. And those are some great pictures of some of that expansion. So
before you leave that one, would that expansion include, John mentioned high hazards, and I know one of the high hazard dams is here. Isn't that you kept the water low to not put pressure on the dam? Is that true, or where does that stand? You did renovations maybe?
Yes, so, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, Chair, no, that's not true. The facility is fully functional under permit with DWR. We have completed the last phase of lining of the reservoir. So that may be some of what you might be thinking about.
Yeah.
So we started the lining projects in 2006, and we've completed the last project about 3 years ago. So we brought the lining all the way to the top.
So was that what the issue was, that you kept the water lower because the lining was lower?
The water levels are a function of how much influent flows we get and how much our export is through irrigation primarily and construction water use. So just as growth has increased in the South Drake Meadows, the pace of growth really has resulted in much higher water levels within the reservoir. And so that's really what the function of the higher water levels that we see now, which is certainly a challenge for us.
Well, then one related question then. Again, John mentioned the high hazard dams, even Virginia Lake, which doesn't appear to have a dam, actually has a little mini dam. But I was under the understanding that this was on the state's list.
It is. It's classified out of the 5 dams that Washoe County owns and operates. This is our largest, and it is considered a high hazard dam. And so that's something that we have the full EAPs in place, inundation mapping, all those things that you're very familiar with.
That's where the water would flow if there was a break or earthquake or something. Okay. So it's not that it needs attention, it's just on a list that if something happened, it would be more serious. Is that it? Is that what the definition of high hazard dam is?
High hazard dams is certain. There's 3 categories of hazard classification for dams, and high is of course the more challenging one because of the risk to human health, human life.
Okay.
So it experiences an annual inspection.
Yeah.
Regular maintenance, reports submitted to the state, all the requirements that go along with that.
But it's not about the status of the dam, it's about the status of if the dam should break, what would happen then? Is that it?
The EAPs, all the, yes.
Okay.
Does not reflect anything with the condition.
That's what I'm trying to get at. It's just that it's in a category that if something should happen, and the Virginia range does have earthquakes, and it is an earthquake sensitive area, so got it. Well, thank you for the explanation.
Thank you. And you can see a picture of the line. That is it.
Thank you. Forward again. Okay.
Does anyone else have any other follow-up questions of our speakers? Well, that was very good. I just mentioned that on our upcoming council, it's very interesting. There is a vote on what rate for reclaimed water we should charge to the Truckee River or Tahoe, Reno Industrial Center, GID, for the reclaimed water, what price? And we're supposed to vote on that next Wednesday. And in that conversation and talking about 1 or 2 other council members, they asked this very question, well, why do, for example, Sierra Sage Golf Course has to pay for reclaimed water in the North Valleys, but golf courses in the South Valleys don't have to pay. In fact, you're desperate to have them as for discharge. And so we were just talking about the variability of price of reclaimed water. So they don't pay in the South Reno, they do pay in North Reno, and we're figuring out what they should pay out in Story County.
We in our original agreement, if I may, we did say what the parameters were going to be, how that rate would be computed. In addition to Truckee River, as I mentioned, with them providing that replacement water and how that works in our system, having them take water from us and having the replacement water there actually benefits. It's almost like a plant upgrade for us, because we now don't have to, any water we send out to them does not count against our permit for the reclaimed water.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I was very involved in helping negotiate that, as you know, not the actual negotiations with Story County, but the deal behind the deal, right? What made sense and all the challenges you went along with having to have return flow to the river with the groundwater component and all the things. But what is interesting from our users' perspective, the citizens, is they are starting to say, well, why do I have to pay? And these other guys get it for free.
Well, you're talking to the wrong users. Because it still has a cost. In South Turkey Meadows, that cost is borne by the ratepayers for sewer.
Well, that is exactly what, I think you were on the call, Trina.
Yeah.
Is exactly what Trina explained, that there's no free lunch here. Someone's got to pay. It's just more opaque to the people in South Reno because it's embedded in their sewer fees. Whereas in North Valleys at the Sierra and the North Valleys
Sports
Regional
complex.
Park, and then there's one more user.
Mayor's Park.
Mayor's
City,
Park, Reno. So there's a Reno, a Washoe County, and a private purveyor of golf, right? Although who owns the underlying golf course? Washoe County. So anyway, that golf course folks have certainly complained, right? Because they have to pay. You probably know about this, Mary Louise, you nod your head, but that's part of, I think, your area. And the South Reno people are, it's not transparent to them that they're paying, all users are paying, it's embedded in their sewer fees, all users, not just the specific reclaimed water user. So it's more distributed. So anyway, this is probably gonna come up at our Reno City Council meeting on Wednesday. So I'm gonna ask you to send this presentation over to somebody, maybe Trina or John, that could distribute it to the council or have it ready so that when this question comes up, I'm confident it is gonna come up because we're being asked to set a rate, that we have some good answers for this, maybe short and formed. But anyway, I think it's really important to understand context so that when we're setting rates for the GID in Story County, people have some kind of awareness of the rest of the story.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Tri-Center actually built all the infrastructure going out there. So they paid for all the infrastructure going out there, whereas in North Valleys, we extended that out between us and the developer that's going through, put that system in place.
It's another great, it's so variable, but this item is about looking at sewer and all these components. And so we've got to take this into account too. And what if it was regionalized? Would we handle it any different or the same? Would each one be a one-off? For example, I use the example of Tumwa has 12 different regional rates for water, as I recall. It'd be at 13 by now. But there's at least 12 different rates that are all based on cost to serve, the cost of the infrastructure, cost to maintain. And so we were discussing, at least in my briefing, well, it makes sense that in reclaimed water world, they all have different costs too. Different costs to treat the water, different costs to distribute the water, et cetera. And so it's not surprising that there would be different rates, but some council members thought it should be the one rate. And one rate might go to a concept of having a regional sewer system where you could regionalize and sort of cross subsidize if we don't do it in water, but if we did it in sewer, would we have one rate for distribution of reclaimed water? So these are all things I think will come up in the study, don't you think? Is there more?
Just a couple more, just wrap up items. So based on the challenges that you heard today from the directors and coming from the discussion, I don't think I need to go into too many of the identified opportunities and constraints that were discussed at the two workshops with the Water Planning Commission. Those two workshops, these are the headings of the topics that we discussed and identified opportunities and constraints. But the number one thing that came out was we really need a subject matter expert to identify what we haven't thought of. What have we not considered? What are we missing? And have the subject matter experts work with the staff working group, the Northern Nevada Planning Commission working group that's been established. Once again, it's my meeting. And so the recommendation from the working group and the Water Planning Commission is to put out a solicitation for qualifications and for subject matter experts that can assist us with that evaluation and do a high-level feasibility study of what do we know now and what do we need to consider moving forward in the regionalization effort. So we have been drafting an RFQ, and with direction from the boards, staff is prepared to issue that request for qualifications in November, and we would anticipate getting submittals back in December, the December timeframe. And after the working group's able to review them, potentially selecting a qualified firm in, February, March, and bringing that back to the boards.
So I'm sure most everybody's familiar with this, the difference between RFQ, which is getting their qualifications, but not doing a scope or that we negotiate with them, and a price that we negotiate with them, just getting their qualifications, versus the RFP going out with a defined scope, right? So how do you guys see this working? You get this firm that's knowledgeable, you get a series of firms, you pick one firm, then would you have to bring it back to who, or if at all?
That's like a great question. We've been talking about this within our working group. So the intent is for it to be a request for qualifications, and my understanding, and I still need to work this out with our Washoe County group, is the request for qualifications under the way the Western Regional Water Commission operates, a professional services agreement. And if it's professional services, then the request for qualification satisfies that need to be able to, the requirement to Western contract with the firm.
So you don't have to bring it back to the board?
We would bring it back to the board, and just to make sure that the board's aware and get approval for the funding as we develop that scope of work. So this isn't the end, you approve it, then you don't see it again.
So I understand correctly, through the RFQ, you could actually avoid an RFP.
We're not required to do the RFP is my understanding, because it's a professional services contract. It's a special services type of activity.
So then you get this firm, so going the next step, I have two questions. One is about price. Well, first scope and then price. So what happens after you get them?
So once we identify the most qualified firm, we would negotiate with them, work with them and negotiate with them, talk to them more about the project and the project needs, so they have a better understanding of what have we done, what needs to be done, develop a scope of work, and negotiate those costs with them. They would submit a fee schedule with their request for qualification, so we would have an idea of making sure that they, satisfy standard rates for those types of services and that they're competitive. And then we would work with them to develop. There's a scope of work outlined in the request for qualifications, but we would have more, it's more kind of like we need to work with them on what haven't we identified, what haven't we considered before we can say, go forth and develop this feasibility study. So there are activities outlined.
So, but we have a budget for this agency. So do you even have an order of magnitude for what you expect to be spending on this study?
We don't have that outlined yet. I think until we understand what the rates are going to be and we understand more from the consulting firm that's selected what the activities might be and how we can possibly phase some of the activities that they're going to be conducting, we will have a better idea of what that scope of work would cost.
Well, are we hesitant to say because we don't want to set out a number, or you just plain old don't know?
I don't know. I don't think we know until we are able to get those.
Until we figure out how comprehensive the scope is and on how high it be, we would fully anticipate this to be like a phase one that we would bring back to you and say, okay, now that you have this kind of information, the benefits, what the feasibility, those things we'd look at, that would then inform the second phase scope. And then that would be back to it as a decision point. So we don't really have a good parameter, I would say, at this point, until we get those solicitations back and develop that first phase one scope.
Well, let me specifically ask the Western Regional Water Commission members, because we have not been in these two workshops and are not on the working group. Just, supportive, do you have questions? Would you, what should be in the scope? Are we going to get a chance to look at the scope when you bring it back to Western Regional Water Commission to vote on? What are we thinking, John, on that? Are we bringing it back?
Certainly, when we bring back the action item, it will have the dollar amount, it will have the scope.
Okay.
That will be present for your approval.
Okay. Well, let me ask those members. We haven't had much to do with this. Any thoughts, Susan or Clara, Paul? We have Miguel on here and Mayor Luce.
Thank you. I just think that this discussion has certainly been going on even longer than I've been involved in this adventure, but it certainly seems that it is going to be a phased approach. And I think we kind of don't know what we don't know right now. And so I think we're essentially a bit wrestling with this uncertainty. And I think moving forward with this next step will give a better direction of where the next course of action is. And so I think although there are experts in the room who probably, have a good idea what this may look like, I think the things that will come out of that will shape where that direction goes. And so I think spending a lot of time on uncertainty, I don't think we need to spend a lot of time. From my perspective, I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on the uncertainty piece. Let's get the information, let's see where it falls, let's see what it looks like, what those costs anticipated are, whether it's even outside the scope of the particular budget, if it's other jurisdictions. There's all these questions.
Yeah.
There's all these questions. I am hopeful that when after the qualifications and the identified organization for the SMEs are identified, then that I think will help, to your point, Kim, in terms of like, they'll be able to identify what we don't know and what we may be including or we're not including. That's why I think in some ways keeping it broad is good. Just throwing that idea out, not that I'll defer to the experts in the room, but I think keeping it broad to a certain extent is good. And then knowing what the objective is. Yeah. And I think the built-in efficiencies that we've seen over the 20 years of Tumwa, I think that's why everyone is really talking about that. I think there'll be some things that will uncover. So I don't want to necessarily bring up stormwater again, but I think that that will kind of, I almost wanted to say something, flesh out. Is that wrong?
Not wrong.
Honestly, it just came right through I swear. It just,
well, what I'm really looking for is that this is listed as a potential action. And I guess what I'm asking is, I want to make sure what you want from us today, Kim. Do you need a vote on us to go forward and do the RFQ?
We are looking for a recommendation from the Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission to the Western Regional Water Commission on moving forward with the solicitation for professional services and to select the firm and bring that and develop that scope of work with them and bring that back to the board for approval.
Right.
And there we go. There's our possible motions on the board.
So any other further questions or comments about this before we do take an action? Anyone? Paul?
Actually, just a comment. I thank all of you for the time and energy that you put into this. Like I've said before, I really think for us to move forward as a community, we need to effectively, efficiently manage our resources, and you can't manage what you don't know. And I think this has been a big unknown. We may have some ideas, and I appreciate us in the city of Sparks kind of getting things dialed in a little bit more, but that's what I'm looking for, the subject matter expert that can help us understand where we go from here, what are we missing?
Yeah, good. Well, it looks like the next step is actually first to have Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission take an action, but then we could take an action. So have you formally taken action before on this?
We have not.
Okay.
So with that, the working group took all of the input that we received at the workshops. We consolidated that into various functions like budgetary rates, debt service evaluation, talked about collective bargaining agreement and staffing. We talked about what various organization structures, regionalization might encompass. We wanted them to look at other administrative considerations and then just on how they would report that back to us. With that, again, the kind of comment we've been talking about on what have we not seen.
Yeah.
So with that, we're looking for a potential motion to make a recommendation to the WRWC on moving forward with this professional services agreement.
And before we do that, what I'm going to do, that'll be our next formal step, but I'm going to ask for public comment. from both those on Zoom and anybody in the room before we actually take our motion. So is there anyone on Zoom that would like to raise their hand and make a comment, pro, con, or some advice on a direction before the motions are made? I'm not seeing any raised hands, but these are all of the participants showing, or there's some that are in a different screen that are?
I'm switching back and forth, Madam Chair, and I don't see any hands or hands.
Okay, all right, and is there anyone in the room that would like to comment or opine on? Okay, all right, well, please go ahead, Mr. Blanford.
All right, so with that, I would entertain a motion.
I will move to recommend to WRWC that WRWC and Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission solicit professional services and qualifications for a regional wastewater and effluent disposal feasibility study to utilize the Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission's working group to select the firm that is most suitable for the evaluation objectives. I'll second.
All right, so I have a motion from Commissioner Crump, a second from Commissioner Brinkwater. Discussion on the motion. Anyone online? Seeing none, I will entertain or call for the vote. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously.
All right. Fantastic, thank you. And then similarly for Western Regional Water Commission, I'm looking for a motion and a second. Yes, Ms. Andriola.
Madam Chair, I'll move to direct staff to solicit professional services and qualifications for a regional wastewater and effluent disposal feasibility study on behalf of WRWC and NNWC and utilize the NNWPC. Oh, I forgot the P. To let the minutes reflect that is NNWPC and utilize the NNWPC working group to select a firm that is the most suitable for the evaluation objectives.
Okay.
I'll second that.
All right, Ms. Siebert. So we have a motion from Ms. Andriola, a second from Ms. Siebert. And just a comment on the motion from me. I'm assuming it doesn't exclude what meeting are we at? Stormwater. We're not specifically giving direction in this motion on that, but I think you've heard the discussion and the concern. I just don't want us to overlook it and go, oh gosh, we have to go back. So not hearing something opposed to that, I assume that's part of it, it's included, and you'll amend the scope to be as broad as possible. Is that a reasonable expectation? Because we're not writing it, you are.
Correct.
Okay.
And this is the direction we're looking for.
Okay. Well, that would be some additional direction, thank you. Okay, so everyone in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries unanimously. All right, good job, everyone. We're on our way. That's fantastic. A question? Will you be posting this for 6 weeks or how long, and what should we expect, and what meeting should we expect to see it back?
That's a good question. So with the board direction today, we're planning to post it either this Friday or next Monday. So we're going to get it going pretty quickly.
Okay.
And that'll give us a schedule of getting, after responding to questions, submittals would be due the week of December 20th. And we're looking at potentially having interviews the week of January 23rd or the following week. And then after the firm is selected by the working group, it would be brought to the Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission at the February meeting. And then to the Denver WC.
Well, I'm happy that you guys have not put these consultants through a process of like submitting on December 28th and or January 1st. I mean, I see this too often as, either public comments requested in this very difficult holiday season or a response to an RFQ. So I'm glad it's before that. So that's good. Good to know.
Yeah, we've had that discussion in our working group.
It's hard sometimes at this time of year to kind of get this all scheduled, but okay. Well, very good. I think we did our biggest, hardest items. We are going to talk about the priorities now under agenda item 9, if I've got this right. And report discussion of possible direction to staff concerning the results of the annual priority setting session that was held by NNWPC on October 2nd. So Kim.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just a quick overview of the process with the Water Planning Commission. Every October, we hold a priority setting session, and the priority setting session is a projects and priorities ranking exercise for us to reaffirm that the projects that we're working on are still a priority, and to look at potential future conceptual projects such as this one and include those, so that when we develop the budget in February, we have all the projects assigned and potential budgets assigned to those projects. So that exercise, staff has created a digital exercise, and the Water Planning Commission members essentially first rank all the topics. So there's 5 primary planning topics in the Regional Water Management Plan. And that's the stormwater, wastewater, water supply, water conservation, and which one did I just miss? Because I just went through the list. I said wastewater, right? And so we have them essentially rank those through a sliding exercise. Which topic are we really focused on? And the reason we do that is because if there is an overabundance of priorities, we don't have enough money, we have to have something to kind of a matrix and a weighting scale where we can say, we really recognized wastewater planning as a priority, so we can apply that weighting to the different projects if needed. We haven't had to do that, but I do this just in case every year. And then they take each project. You'll see in your packet, if you look back at attachment 9B, you'll see a list of all the projects with a brief project description. And they actually do this digitally. This is just to show you a written representation of what they go through. And they rank the project in a score of 1 to 5, kind of like you would rank a hotel. So they look at the project, and if they gave it a score of a 1, it's not a low quality project, sorry, like you would a hotel. But what it is if you're looking at funding those projects and you scored a 1 means that project could possibly be funded in a future year. We don't have funding for all the projects that could be funded in a future year. All the way up to 5, this is a really important project and it needs to be funded in this fiscal year. So that's the ranking. And so you'll see the results on page 1, the overarching topics. They rated the wastewater and reclaimed water priorities at the top, then stormwater, flood control, water supply, and water conservation. And that's how we would weight them. And then this is our list of projects. On page number, I apologize. You'll see in ours,
it's also page 1.
Is it on page 1? Okay, so I did put the right page number. Thank you. So you'll see this is listed in order of total score. And it does align really well with the previous slide where we talked about the various planning topics and how they rank them, because you'll see most of our top 4 or 5 projects are related to wastewater and effluent management planning. So it was in alignment with how the project's priorities are ranked with the overarching topics and how they wanted to prioritize those topics as well. And then what we do is we feed all those projects into the tentative professional services detail of our budget, and you see that in March and May each year. Some of the projects have budgets attached because some of those projects are projects that we do every year, and we have a set budget for those projects. They're kind of our legacy projects, such as the Desert Research Institute Precipitation Monitoring Project. And then we have projects that have budgets because we already have a professional services agreement with them, and they're multi-year projects. Some of them are like the Stormwater Committee. We fund the Stormwater Coordinating Committee annually, and so that budget is set each year. But there are budgets that are these conceptual projects like we discussed today where we don't have a budget for the regionalization of the wastewater. Until we get that budget, we put it to be determined in that column. And then you'll see at the bottom, there's a project contingency fund. And currently, with all the priorities that have budgets, we still have $500,000 remaining for that project contingency fund, which is that fund we would use to then put that budget together for the conceptual projects as the scopes of work are developed. So this year's tentative professional services budget detail amounts to $2.14 million. And for reference, I thought I'd put last year's budget, and that budget was $2.375 million. So we're a little bit under budget compared to what we allocated last year. But again, we have a couple projects that we anticipate the scopes of work getting developed and going ahead and putting a budget in there for that. And we will adjust that when we bring the budget back. Please. So what I wanted to do really quickly, rather than go through each project, we've had a lot of presentations today, and I don't want to go through every single project and what those projects are. We get presentations throughout the year. I wanted to offer up an opportunity to kind of have questions on any of the projects that you see on the list, or if you've had a chance to read through the project descriptions, we can take questions on those. One of the things I did want to point out is we have the Water Readings Conference in March, and we typically bring the tentative budget to the February WCTV in March. So we're going to have to move that forward to February. So I don't normally ask for this, but I am asking for acceptance of the fiscal year 26 tentative services budget detail, knowing, with the understanding that there may be modifications made in February before we approve it, but it'll come back in February. We can get that done before.
So there are about a little over 20 projects. I will share that these names of these projects don't resonate with me as far as me knowing what those are. I'll give you an example. Some I do know, but like I don't know the big Washoe connection to Little Washoe impact study, for example. And I was going to ask, without going into all 22, I'm assuming that the top ones are also the most expensive, but I don't know that. But I was thinking maybe you could give us just a one-liner or two, call it 3 lines on the top 5, that were ranked the highest. So we just know what those are.
Okay.
Without reading all the summaries.
Sure.
Like I am very unclear what the number 1, regional water management coordination is. Okay. Do you guys meet monthly and coordinate, or what do you do?
Yeah, so that's the Nevada Water Innovation Institute leadership contract, where Krishna Pagela's group works with staff and the regional agency, the Water Planning Commission members, to implement the One Water Nevada effort.
So it's for
it's for One Water Nevada. And that is also, we have an agreement with them and had discussions with them. Since we're doing the regional water management plan update, they're going to provide a tremendous amount of assistance to staff on updating the regional water management plan, particularly the wastewater and water. Okay. The second one is also the Nevada Water Innovation Institute, and that's enhanced wastewater source control. So we've been talking about the advanced purified water projects, and they are currently involved in assisting with the Rito Stead sampling efforts to look at source water control, what's coming into the wastewater treatment plant that might affect the purified water treatment process.
Just a question about that. Let's say you identify, I mean, this would be hard to pinpoint, but let's say it's birth control components, right? Parameters. I mean, how could you control for this?
I would just say this is more like there is an industrial user, and maybe there's something that's coming in through the stream, and that might require us identifying who that is and then looking to see if they're pre-treatment.
Could do pre-treatment back at the plant
to remove whatever constituents that is causing issues.
Well, the reason I picked the birth control or hormones or whatever is just for the good of the order. At one time I worked in Florida, and they were discharging to the Florida waters, and a lot of animals, fish particularly, were developing what they call diploid. They were developing both male and female parts on fish, and it was kind of crazy. This started at least 20 years ago, recognizing this issue. It was very disturbing. We didn't know what to do about it, particularly because, everyone's peeing and all those things are going out into the water, including all the drugs that you're taking. And they were all affecting the amphibian environment, for fish, for invertebrates, for all of it. And it was considered a pretty big problem. And in some of the estuaries, it was a really big problem, that were closer to the sources. So I just wondered, some things you could control, like your example of industrial, but others you don't have a lot of ability, lest we pre-treat all of the water for these hormonal or medicinal
and that
additives.
is one of the things in the process that we do to look at to treat those. Trina, did you have something you wanted to add in addition?
I just wanted to add that the advanced purified water facility will treat those very things.
Yes.
And break them down.
Yeah, including PFAS.
Right.
For instance.
Okay.
And that's another one of those items we done.
Right, it was a little lower on the list, but that was just the
I'm
consultant.
just saying that the one water Nevada process also treats for PFAS.
That's fantastic.
There's something else that we wouldn't have control, but there may be some other constituents that we mentioned, maybe from industrial suppliers
Right.
that could be.
So this project would actually identify those?
Yes.
Sure, if I may ask a question along the same lines on this one. So if we're doing this study at this location, how will it relate to Tumwater or Stemwater for the other facilities?
That's a fantastic question.
Yes,
So,
it is.
yeah, that's a great question. So Nevada Water Innovation Institute is finalizing a draft for doing this at Cutmore next. And then we also have one currently under development for the South Turkey Coast facility. So we are planning on staggering that budget. We'll pipe it back for an extra budget ask in when the Tumwater facility is, when their sampling plan is complete. So as they get completed, we'll bring those forward to the board.
So this will start at Reno Stead?
And then I just would say for long term, we also are looking at Tumwater because we know what our limitations are there. The potential that we may have a similar process, advanced water purification at Tumwater. So all the work that we're doing at the North Valley Stead plant does translate to our other facilities. Perfect.
Michael, did you want to add anything on that? 'Cause I didn't.
Well, sure. So just one thing to keep in mind is that we kind of glossed over it in the presentation earlier, but there are 5 treatment plants with 5 different processes, and they have 5 different abilities to treat those various chemicals, like the synthetic estrogens that Chairwoman was speaking of, or the PFAS or whatever. So not only the reason the work is coming at you in the faces like they are is because the plants are different. And what Reno Stead with its treatment process might be able to just assimilate into its activated sludge. Tumwater has a much shorter sludge age, younger sludge age. It would blow right through. And then of course the receiving water, Swan Lake versus the Truckee River, very different environment. So they have to be done per sewer shed simply because they're very different animals, even though we think of them as a wastewater treatment plant, but they're all different.
But wouldn't it be the source water that we'd be looking at that would relate to its direct or indirect potable use? Wouldn't that be the outcome that you'd be looking for, I think, isn't it?
Yes. So the outcome of the wastewater plant, which is going to feed into the advanced water treatment plant, absolutely, like Mr. Flensburg just said, that's going to be the same standard. But what each treatment plant upstream of that can do on its own now, or what we would have to restrict, you may be able to direct discharge something to Tumwater because it can treat it and then go into the APWF versus at Reno Stead, you would require the industrial client to pre-treat that because potentially the Reno Stead plant would not be able to treat it adequately.
Perfect, thank you.
And so the next one.
Okay, so the next one is the Data Instincts, One Water Nevada, which is directly related to the first 2. That's the contract with Mark Milan. And they are doing the communication plan, working closely with Tumwater on the advanced purified water, specifically outreach. They're also providing the tours that we do each year to get staff and leadership a better understanding of what different sites are and different communities are doing. And then I'm going to, I know Commissioner Hack is going to kill me for this, but the Big Washoe Connection to Little Washoe impact study that was brought forward, and that's a new concept project. And I'm going to ask Commissioner Hack to kind of speak on that.
Sure.
Thanks.
So really the connection between Big and Little Washoe has been lost over time. Back in the 1800s, there was actually a little dam that used to release water from Big Washoe into Little. Over time, the channel has become choked off with sediment and willows and vegetation. So now that all at the highest of water years, really no water is making its way down to Little Washoe Lake, and the dam, which is supposed to regulate releases from Little Washoe into Steamboat Creek, is almost non-functional. Water doesn't even make its way down to the dam in most years. Typically, Little Washoe will be full by the end of the summer. Big Washoe is kind of like drained out. Just the opposite's true. Little Washoe is almost dry, and Big Washoe stays full. So all that runoff that's coming in from the eastern slopes of the Sierras kind of comes into Big Washoe and stays there and just evaporates. So it's got some real implications for not only water right holders on the Steamboat Creek and the main Truckee River, but potential flooding implications. You imagine going into winter with a high Big Washoe Lake elevation with outlet capacity kind of choked off, and you come into a couple big AR events. And so there's a lot of people who have an interest in this. Obviously, NDOT would have a huge interest because the first place it's going to go is up over 580, and then there's Endow, State of Nevada, Washoe County Water Conservation District, Truckee River water right holders, the Water Master. So I think it's a problem. I've been here over 20 years. It just problem seems to get worse and worse every year. And I just think it's time to have someone really look at it because it really is a problem.
So would this be a separate study that we would contract for?
Yeah, I think talking to Kim, what we would do is I represent Washoe County Water Conservation District. Besides Tom, we would go out for either.
They would more clearly identify the problem, or would they also recommend some solutions?
We have $100,000. It looks like we've allocated. I don't know if they'd be able to do both, but that would be nice. But at least study the problem and identify it and identify what's going on.
And then my last question is, so how does water get to Steamboat? You're saying it's locked into Washoe's acting like a terminal lake, and it's not draining through Washoe. It's not draining.
Years, that's correct.
So how is Steamboat getting its water?
Galena,
Galena, and runoff from the east, maybe from Virginia Range or something?
Yeah, a little bit, but right now if you look at Steamboat Creek, it's really nothing in it until you get to Galena and Galena's done.
Gotcha.
So it's problematic.
It seems like a good study to me. I mean, we need to manage all of this regionally, and even if it's to have Little Washoe be a flood reservoir, which it isn't serving as right now, just to even regulate the flows on Steamboat, all of this seems good.
And we have it classified under flooding, but it's also a water supply issue. That's premier.
Okay. So let me ask the group, does anybody else would like any of the other projects, a little 1 or 2 liner on those? And while you're thinking about that, do you anticipate funding all 22, or are some of the ones at the bottom not funded?
We anticipate funding all of them. There's a couple of at the bottom that we would like to work with for the DRI, the Battle Landscape Certified Technician Certification Program. They've had some staff turnover, so we need to get a hold of their staff and really make sure we understand that scope of work. So
and then I'm going to put in a pitch for one of the last ones, which is the stream gauge installations. So when I was director of flood, we had moved the stream gauge program under flooding. And it's where it continues today. I think Danielle's on here, she could speak to it. But I know the more information we have, I'm a little concerned this tracks back to the one we were just talking about. We might have stream gauging, but we don't have any ability to do anything with that information because we don't have control. This is the Southwest stream gauging. So, I'm sorry, so it's Southwest, not Southeast. But anyway, I know we can always use better and more. Is this to actually put in stream gauges or the reading of what is the instrument? What is this about? Does anyone know?
Trina, do you want to speak to this one?
Sure. To your point, Commissioner Dorr, we have a lack of stream gauging in Southwest Reno, and so we thought it would be a good idea to put this in here and see if we could, re-engage in a program that was, I believe, once administered by Washoe County many, many years ago.
Yeah.
Just recognizing that there is a need for additional information, and the longer stream record you have, the better. The better information you have with looking at relevant floodplains and understanding risk in our community. We're currently working with FEMA on a restudy of a number of streams in the Southwest Reno area, and better information would certainly serve us better today, but in 20 years it will help better serve us then. So the amount of funding, I think, is just to really identify some stream locations and see what the need is and where we can identify the best locations for those.
And is this done in connection with the USGS or? Because some of them are.
Yes, some of them are. Initially, we were thinking, the flood project also manages some of the stream gauges and working with them on it.
Okay. All right, so anyway, you're gonna do something with it. It sounds for the long term good. And one other one I had a question on was the regional drainage manual. So as far as I know, this has been a project going on for like 20 years or something, right? And I just wondered in this 1 year, what would be the hope and dream of doing on this subject?
So the intent here is actually to solve that problem. Which is to get all the jurisdictions update appropriately. We've made some changes to certain areas, our closed basins, for instance, in terms of some of those requirements. But it's also to give clear direction to our designers out there that are bringing projects to us so that we can get those, be more clear and point to where these are and to provide the education and training that would go with it.
Okay.
Trina, anything you want to add?
I guess I would add that we do have development projects, things like that coming in with newer technology, and we don't have good direction in our current manual, giving those developers the right types of information on what we do and do not want or would accept in our community and what makes sense in our community. So it's really to work with City of Sparks, Washoe County, City of Reno to update that manual. It hasn't been fully updated since, John, I don't know, maybe you know that date. I know we've had a couple of interviews. The date of it is 2009. So I think it's just due time-wise to give it an overhaul.
So I wanted to say I would support it, and one of the reasons I think it's important is that we have a lot of development, and I would love to see our developers do better in this field. Just as an example, and it's not due to this, but we have a going on 18-year lawsuit with the Double Diamond drainage infrastructure people, okay? It was already 8 years when I got on council, now it's been another 10. So it's not all about this, but there is great confusion about modeling what goals they're trying to achieve down there and what's reasonable, not only the money to do the fixes, but also agreeing on a set of standards and so on. So I just think this would help reduce confusion going forward. And to that end, one of the reasons I care about the stormwater is really, I want all the developers to do better on their own properties and develop maybe regional, or let's say, if there are subsets of larger developments, like there's the Centerra, which is out by Verde, and it's supposed to have like 3,000 people, as I recall. Well, there's probably gonna be divided into sections, and are they all gonna do their own drainage stuff, or are they gonna team together and do a regional thing for their sub-region, call it? So I think the more that we could give them the tools to do a better job would be great. That's kind of where I'm thinking. So anyway, would anyone else like to ask a question about any of these projects? Okay, if not, are we happy with the prioritization that the Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission has come up with? Yeah. I mean, you've heard too, I wouldn't mind moving up on the group, but as long as they're getting done, I'm happy. You know, the drainage manual and the stream gauging. Important. I'd love to see some work on it. All right, well, if we are in concurrence, I think we are looking at, have you already taken a motion on this, John, at your various workshops? Is this just for?
Just that we did the exercise to then supply this to you.
Okay. Do you need to further endorse it, or, I mean?
Staff was just looking for a recommendation from the water planning to the WRWC and then the WRWC.
Oh, you do want two motions, okay. Well, before we do that, I'm gonna ask again, is there anyone online on the Zoom that would like to make a comment, move a project, prioritize something, deprioritize something in favor of something else? Are you any hands on your other person?
I'm checking, I haven't seen any hands.
And anyone here in the room would like to speak about it? No? Okay, well, over to you, John.
All right, and for the Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission, and with these priorities, I would ask for a motion. One possibly that is listed up there on the screen.
I'll make a motion to accept fiscal year 26 priorities, setting results, and tentative professional services budget detail, and recommend the WRWC incorporate them in the WRWC fiscal year 26 tentative budget.
I have a motion from Commissioner Hauk. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Allen. All right. And with that, seeing no other hands or discussion, may I have or action on the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Chair.
Over to us. Before I get a motion on this, I realized I have one more question. So there's been decades of conversation about this quad knob study that was done, estimated, I think, 81 million. This covers North Valley's flooding issues. I see something on here called the Cold Springs Water Balance. Not really sure what that is, but is there anything on these project lists that would get to sort of the Swan Lake, Silver Lake, White's Lake drainage issues? Do we need more study, or do we already have all the study we need and we just need, 81 million or 100 million to implement it?
Eric, you want to take that?
I'm not aware of any additional studies.
I mean, we know what we know, and we know that a lot of work needs to be done. Is that right?
Yes, there's a lot of work.
So most of these are studies, analysis. They're not building projects, right? Because building
Correct.
projects is multi-millions of dollars. These are in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? So I just wondered, I mean, it would be good, when you're doing your other wastewater study, to understand there's these huge unmet needs, for example, North Valley's, that need millions of dollars of work, even if you took them piece by piece. And so just, keep that front of mind when you're doing your stuff.
Certainly, and I would say that a lot of the work we do here is of these planning studies that then go into our regional water management plan.
Yeah.
Which is really one of our main goals here.
Which includes our CIP.
Which includes all of these different items, and as we become more informed, then that also gets incorporated into the regional water management plan.
Okay. Well, over to Western Regional Water Commission, I've said that let me ask him again. So there is some money being put towards the street region.
Yes.
It's maybe 100 grand or something.
I think it's a to be determined 50K is what we have.
Yeah. Well, anyway,
Yeah.
I think that, it's like trees, right? It's the tree that we planted yesterday that matters, right? It's gonna take 50 years. I think Trina McGreen made a good comment that for long-term analysis, you have to start collecting the data now. So every year we don't collect the data, we're very deficient. So I'd love to see that a bit prioritized. I don't want to take it out of turn or say it needs to move from 25 to 32 or anything like that. But I do want to make sure, that we are putting some funds, and if we have extra funds, some studies that don't move forward, this is probably an easier place to put some money in because you're actually installing something. The other thing, I'm sure all of these studies are very valuable and needed. But I do think this manual, how much money do you have for that, the drainage manual?
Is 100.
So I don't think for 100,000, we're gonna fix that drainage manual, personally.
No, but it would like to be done in phases. I think this year, as Director Crum said, we'd probably be looking at what do we need to do, what the process.
Okay.
We need to hire subject matter experts, we
All right, getting started. Okay, all right. Well, anyway, I've said what I think. Could I get a motion from one of our members, Mr. Mitchell?
Go ahead and make a motion to accept the FY26 priority setting results and tentative professional services budget detail and direct staff to incorporate them into the WRWC FY26 tentative budget for February 2025.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Mr. Anderson, second by Ms. Andriola. Any comment, other input on these studies before we take action? All right, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries unanimously. Good work again. I know how complicated this is to try to say, which of my children Am I favoring this year, what work's gonna get done, but I think you guys have done, the best that you can do, and I'm glad that we're moving forward on so many different projects. I think it's great. Okay, back to our agenda. Looks like we're right on schedule. Looks like we're closing out 9, moving on to, and that is you, Kim.
Jen, can you forward, please?
Program Manager's Report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, corrected for the record. So this is a report primarily for the Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission. We do a quarterly revenue and expense report on our projects and talk about what's being accomplished in that quarter with the various projects and give a financial update. There's typically not a lot to report in the first quarter, and we just kick off that fiscal year. So we had, we look at the fiscal year 25, invoices, and then I give a little bit of an update. So on the Cold Spring Water Balance, which is one of the projects that you mentioned in the last item, this one that you weren't quite sure. This water balance is essentially looking at water input and output in the Cold Spring area. And this is being done through Washoe County, and Stantec is the consultant that's working on that. And so they're working to complete the model. They're at the stage where they're completing the model, and they're looking at calibrating that model in November. The Desert Research Institute Precipitation Can Monitoring Network, they bill us every quarter for that. They are out there, they have about 82 precipitation rain gauges that they check to just collect data on what our precipitation looks like in the planning area in Washoe County. We had the Stormwater Permit Coordinating Committee, their ongoing activities, as well as the watershed assessments. So there's field work being done on the tributaries to the Kentucky River on some watershed assessments that are being done. They also have data instincts. I'm working with Mark Milan primarily to schedule up some more site visits for leadership and staff. We're working towards that. They're assisting with the One Water Nevada communication plan. Continually updating the website. Mark Milan is also working on getting more of us to attend the water reuse conference and symposium that's in Tampa, Florida in March. We've had a couple commissioners sign up for that already, so we're excited to have that attendance. And that's pretty much it for the beginning of the fiscal year. And our financials look good. They're right on point. Quarter 1 is expected revenue and expenses.
Okay, perfect. All right. Questions for Kim? No one, anyone online would like to ask a question of Kim? No. All right, anyone in the room have a question for Kim on this topic? Right, seeing none, I don't think we have to take action, it's just an update, so appreciate it. We're gonna close that out and move to item 11, which is discussion of possible direction to staff regarding agenda items and dates for future meetings. So let's start with the dates, and then I do have one agenda item to request, but let's see where everybody is.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the record. So we don't hold meetings in December unless it's a burning desire to. There's no priorities that we need to address at that time. In January, the Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission meeting will not be held because it was January 1st, New Year's Day, so we'll be holding that meeting. WRWC will convene on January 15th. That will be the WRWC board elections. And in February, we'll hold a February 5th Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission meeting and a WRWC meeting on the 19th. And I just wanted to let you know that that's the tentative budget approval normally we hold in March. We're going to be doing it in February because of the water. And that's what I have. So do you have any other?
Well, there's nothing in March. And then
well, the March will be the Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission meeting on March 5th. And then there's no WRWC meeting because of the water reuse symposium that week. Okay.
And then April, May, June.
Those,
like the rest of the fiscal year.
Yeah, I'll bring the rest of the year forward in January.
All right. Okay, great. I have one suggestion for an agenda item which should be of great interest to both groups. And this is, you may or may not have yet met our brand new state climatologist. Has anyone met him? His name's Baker Perry. He's housed in the geography department. This guy has worked all over the world, installing particularly water measurement equipment at the highest altitudes in the world. So he's a mountain climber. He's gone on many expeditions. Two of his expeditions have been made into specials on National Geographic. One on called Exploring the. One is about the jungle, and one is about the highest altitudes, like the Andes and so on. He does. I was lucky enough to see a presentation that he did. I serve on the. It was called Mackey School Mines Advisory Board. It's now under the College of Science, but it's still the Mackey School Mines Earth Sciences and Engineering Advisory Board. Anyway, he came to our last meeting, which was last month, and everyone was riveted. And a lot of these people, I've been on that board over 25 years. A lot of these people have been there, done it, seen it all. But he had us all riveted because he shared with us his adventures, the challenges of instrumenting at these high elevations, the information they're trying to get on climate change, and what he hopes to do in the position here, of great relevance to us. So I was going to recommend and that we invite him for one of our meetings to give a presentation, probably be about, it could go as long as 30 minutes, but it'd probably be closer to 20. And he would probably introduce us to, some of the specials, the equipment, and some of what he wants to do here. He's come to us from, as I understand it, the Appalachian area, and he also works in emergency management. I think he is a volunteer firefighter, and when I met with him, he was flying back to the Smokies, that general area, with all the flooding from Helene. So he was going back and forth and getting supplies and equipment and dealing with water issues back there as he transitioned here. So that was also interesting what his experiences there. So it's more to get to know him and to get to know his background and to get to know what kind of information he's thinking about doing, but maybe more important, we're like his constituency. I mean, who cares more about what he's doing than the people here, really? And so it would be a great opportunity to begin a dialogue with him in terms of, okay, well, we get what you have in mind, but what would help us? Where do we need more instrumentation? That's why I mentioned the stream gauging. Where can we use some more data analysis to help us with our water planning or whatever we're doing? And I would want to include, make a special invitation to the Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission to hear this. I mean, you could watch it on Zoom, it would be just fine on that method. We could post a joint meeting if you wanted, or at least say possible quorum of your board if you're participating. But anyway, I wanted to request that pretty soon. I think it'd be great for our January meeting, frankly. I do, because the sooner you get to know him, the better. And I don't want him to get all his great ideas about what he thinks his job is about before he gets input from us, on some things we'd like to see his office take care of or address. So that's what I wanted to offer. Again, his name's Baker Perry. He started about 2 months ago, I want to say. Okay, anyone else want to propose an item for either board to discuss?
Just the items we talked about earlier, that we would bring back the requests or the proposals.
Okay, good. And that, you said that's coming back in January for the sewers?
February.
Oh, February. We do have our meeting in February. Okay. All right, anybody else have a proposal for an agenda item or request that we've been wondering about? Okay, don't see any here. You know what? On the screen, we have members as well of both commissions. Anyone want to request an agenda item? No hands so far. Okay. Anyone else in the room want to propose a topic you want to talk about? No? Okay. All right. Well, given that, we'll close out that item. And we're back to public comment. Anybody online? Anyone in the room? Okay, we will close out public comment. Any final commission comments from either group? No? Okay, staff? Anything good in order? All right, well, I want to thank everybody for your time today. I think it was a very productive meeting. We got to delve into some things in a little more detail than we usually do. And we also got done about 45 minutes ahead of schedule, which is excellent. So we were scheduled to go to 4:30 possibly, so we didn't do that. So with that, I forget at this board, do we take our motions?
You don't.
Okay, well, I will declare us adjourned. So thank you again, everyone, for being here.